Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, eREMI, a structural approach to long-term economic and demographic forecasting. This webinar is being presented by Celso Lopez and Jack Hausler from REMI. I'm Brian Reel, and I'm thrilled to host this presentation. At REMI, our mission is to inform public policy. We provide software that allows government decision makers to test the economic effects of their policies before they're implemented. We work in the fields of economic development, tax, transportation, energy and environment, equity, and more. If you have any questions about REMI specifically, I encourage you to reach out to us through email at info@remi.com, and I would gladly connect you with the appropriate member of our team. If at any point during this presentation you have a question, I encourage you to enter that question in the question box. And time permitting, I'll moderate these questions to the speakers after the presentation has concluded. If somehow we aren't able to get to your question, we'll be sure to reach out personally. I also want to mention that in about an hour after the presentation concludes, a copy of the slides and a recording will be sent to you through email. Once you get a closer look at these materials, if you have any questions, please reach out to us again at that address I just mentioned, the info@remi.com. Again, thank you so much, everybody, for being here. And that's enough from me for now. Take it away, Jack.
Yeah, if you could just move to the next slide, Brian. So we're just going to start with an introduction of REMI for those who aren't familiar. So at REMI, we are the nation's leader in economic forecasting. We were founded as a group of professors out of UMass Amherst and quickly moved private. And we're driven by the goal of making database decisions to improve public policy. Here are some of our clients that have utilized our models to help drive database decision makings in their regions.
And hi everyone, I'm Celso. And so eREMI is our newest line of economic analysis software. So for 40 years, we've specialized in economic impact analysis. So looking at what are the long-term effects of different policies and initiatives and how that impacts the long-term economy. But the thing is, many of our clients and many people out there, including like MPOs, those sorts of organizations, don't really need the impact analysis ability. But the baseline forecast that we use for eREMI is still an extremely valuable tool that we've developed over those 40 years. And so that's what eREMI is. It's the REMI baseline forecast, and we're now proud to offer it as a standalone product. And so now we'll look at some of the two scenarios we're looking at. So two use cases for eREMI. And the first one is long-range planning, which is looking at infrastructure and demographic shifts over time and how that data is used for long-range planning and decision-making. And then afterwards, Jack will do a site selection scenario. So for this demonstration, we'll be looking at the state of Vermont. Vermont's an interesting state because it's moderately wealthy, but it has an aging population and has no major cities. So using the eREMI model, we'll bring up, first of all, the population pyramid in the year 2050. As you can see, the male to female population, male is in blue, female is in orange, is roughly consistent. And you can see that kind of 50s age range, the 50-year-old mark, is kind of the largest segment of the population here. And then if we look at the change over time, starting historically with historical data in 2001, going all the way out to 2060, you can see the average population becomes older over time. So there's a shift from the younger to the older, and that older segment of the population becomes the largest. And an interesting note is around the 18-year-old mark, that population remains pretty consistent, and that's of course due to the university education population that moves into the region for those purposes. And so, what's driving this population change? Well, using the eREMI model, we have a whole host of variables we can look at. And here we have three of the major variables that go into population. So we have deaths, births, and economic migrants. And at the beginning, um, deaths outweigh births. So there are more people dying than being born. But the economic migrants that are moving into the region for work, for opportunities, that is enough to make it so the population still continues to climb. So the population is still increasing. But around the 2040 mark or so, you can see that economic migration starts to stagnate. And while births remain consistent, the amount of deaths rise, and that's of course because the population is getting older, so that rate of death is higher. And if we look at a different state in contrast, here we're looking at the Texas, Dallas, Fort Worth region. This is an example of a healthy growth in population projected to grow pretty significantly and continue growing. So in the US, major cities are really kind of leading that growth. And that's because they're more desirable, there's more opportunity. People don't want to stay in the rural areas as much. And of course, with those strong industries, with that growing population and everything, there's an increase in consumption, and that increase in consumption kind of has a positive feedback effect. So there's more consumption, there's more people moving in. So therefore, more people need healthcare, education services. So more people move in to fulfill those needs, and it kind of sustains itself. And here, still in Texas, we can look at the sector specialization. So these are location quotients we're looking at, which is a ratio of industrial specialization, and that compares the region's economic activity, those industries, to the rest of the U.S. So one means roughly on par with the rest of the U.S., and anything above that means it's more specialized to the region itself. So here, looking at Texas, of course, support activities for mining that has a massive location quotient, almost 8.5, so about 8 times more than the rest of the U.S. Um, kind of industry. And then oil and gas extraction has a 4.5 location quotient, also pretty high. And farming there, twice as high as the national average, and that's because Texas is ripe for farming activities, lots of flat land, and of course has a lot of oil and natural resources. So looking back at Vermont, we're projecting here the industries, and these are four key industries that we selected because they're the highest in terms of employment, in terms of jobs. And what we see is retail trade decreases, and that's for two reasons. One is the move towards online commerce, and generally there's a trend of less retail stores popping up. And then, of course, with a declining population, there's less demand for retail trade. Professional, scientific, and technical services grows slightly. The state and local government also grows slightly, and construction remains pretty consistent. And then again, if we go back to the sector specialization chart here, looking at the location quotients, uh, Vermont, of course, forestry and logging has a very high location quotient, and that's due to Vermont's geographical features. Um, lots of forest, very, very green land, um, lots of natural resources. And then accommodation has a high location quotient. And that's because Vermont, even though it's not a populous state, it's very desirable for getaways, especially if you're in the New England region. So, like skiing, hiking, that sort of thing. Vermont's a very popular destination for that. And it's a very hilly environment, so there's not a ton of space for housing everywhere. So the accommodation has a moderately high compensation rate.
Now moving on to an automotive site selection scenario. Some of the key metrics we're going to look at is industry-specific productivity and output for the region, which give an insight into labor efficiency and market saturation that's already there. We're also going to look at wage rates and intermediate input output, which essentially gives us an insight into cost forecasting and shipping cost forecasting. So for the auto manufacturing productivity, we have on the left the productivity in 2025, and then the percentage change from 2025 to 2060. And this kind of showcases a lens that site selectors can take into which regions are growing and where labor efficiency lies in the region. For primary metal output, this is a key input for automotive vehicles, and this can kind of give a lens into forecasting a shipping costs, how far they're going to have to ship their inputs for these automobiles, and being able to forecast those costs gives a better idea into where to choose their site. The same applies to fabricated metals, another key input. And it's a similar map to primary metals, but there are some regional differences. So being able to choose a region that has enough proximity to both primary and fabricated metals is key for automotive industries. For wages and salaries, this gives site selectors an idea of how much they're going to have to pay their workers and helps them forecast their labor costs. On the left, again, we see the 2025 wages and salaries, and on the right, we see the percentage change from 25 to 2060. So this gives them more of a depth in long-term forecasting for their wage costs. Some additional applications of eREMI and corporate site selecting include a demographic forecast, employment shock capabilities, and population shock capabilities. This can help to inform marketing strategies to best reach the target demographics of the area. And it can also update metrics for output, industry data for changes in employment and population. Another key metric that less specific to the automotive manufacturing and more specific to site selection in general is economic migration. So economic migration is when people move for an economic opportunity. And these maps showcase what it is now and where it outlooks into 2050. So it gives site selectors a lens into how vast their labor force will be. This is a labor force forecast for ages 30 to 34 for 2025, and also the percentage change from 2025 to 2060. This is kind of a prime age for workers in the labor force, and the higher percentage change areas show where people will be coming in. So you can see in the map on the right that a lot of people seem to be leaving the deep southern states such as Louisiana and Mississippi and moving to Texas. And a lot of that's because of the economic opportunity that was shown in the last slide. Wrapping up, so like Celso said earlier, not all of our clients need our modeling capabilities for specific inputs on projects. A lot of them utilize our baseline forecast, and that's really what eREMI offers, and we're happy to announce it as a standalone product.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jack and Celso, for the excellent presentation. We're now about to be getting into the question and answer portion. So if you have any questions, I definitely encourage you to put those into the chat now, and we can discuss them as a group. I also want to remind everybody that in about an hour and a half after the presentation concludes, You'll be receiving the slides and a copy of the recording of this presentation. So after you get a closer look at these materials, if you have any questions, please reach out to us at the email that's currently on the screen, and I'd gladly connect you with our two presenters.